Throughout the year, Darren and I get a lot of questions about how do we control weeds when the weather's adverse? Because one of the things we talk about all the time is you can get better and easier weed control when the weather's great. When it's warm, not hot, but warm and humid, and it has been for several days, and then it's warm and humid afterwards, and we have great subsoil moisture. Well, what that means is for a lot of these herbicides, when the weed's actively growing, you can get more into the plant, and then it moves easier to the growing point. Weed dies faster, you get better overall weed control. So how does this work when the weather's adverse?
Well, first of all, let's look at conditions that make it really tough for farmers to spray their weeds. One would be wind. Well, in this year, we saw some of the windiest conditions that we've ever seen. In fact, we were 5 to 10 miles per hour above normal for wind speed during one of the major times that farmers are out trying to spray in our region. Now, when you get windy days, you just can't spray. What farmers will do then, when they know they've got a windy week and they really need to get some spraying done, is they will just be ready. Farmers will have product on hand. They will have their sprayers loaded up with water where all they've got to do is add in that product, or they'll watch that weather hour by hour to find, hey, here's a 2-hour window on Tuesday that I can spray. They'll be ready to go so they can hit the ground running and get as much product out there in those windy times as they can.
All right, when it's hot and dry, what happens with weeds, just like all plants, they develop a thicker leaf cuticle. The reason why they do that is if it's too dry out in the air, plants are always kicking moisture out, pulling moisture back in. Well, if they can't get the moisture back in, that's not a good thing. So as a defense mechanism, the plant gets basically a thicker wax on it. Well, the problem with that is you got to get the herbicide through that wax and into the plant. So what you can do as a farmer is use something like methylated seed oil or crop oil, or even bump those rates if you want to. Those are designed to help bust through, to help penetrate through that wax and deliver your herbicide into the plant.
Well, let's take the opposite conditions. Let's say it's too cold, because every spring we talk to farmers that say, you know what, it's just been too cold. My weeds aren't actively growing. If you don't have actively growing weeds, it's going to be very difficult to use a product to kill them. But then think about it this way. If weeds aren't actively growing, does it really matter if you wait a few days then? They aren't any bigger when you go out a few days later. So being patient sometimes is the right answer in order to get better weed control.
Otherwise, what we would suggest is upping the rate. Roundup, for example, will tell you if the nighttime temperature is below 50 degrees within 2 days before or after spraying, you need to increase your rate by 50% as long as that's still on label. So you can overcome cold weather by bumping the rate of the herbicide.
Let's talk about too wet as well. This is another issue that farmers will run into from time to time. They're all ready to go and spray and they get a 2-inch rain. Now the soils may not be super saturated and waterlogged, but it's just too muddy to drive a ground rig through the field. For these reasons and others, you may see aerial application being done, whether it's a helicopter or a plane flying over the field. Obviously you aren't going to create any ruts through that mud when you're flying over the top, but you can still get your product sprayed timely this way.
The last thing I wanted to bring up is rain fast times. Now on the label of most herbicides, it will tell you this is rain fast in 30 minutes or 60 minutes or 2 hours, whatever it is. But just as a general rule, we've always found that once the product dries onto the plant, we're in good shape. Okay, so you got to pay attention to when's the rain coming, but the other thing you have to pay attention to is dew. What we found is if you spray later on in the evening, dew starts forming, and when that dew forms, there's so much moisture there, it doesn't allow that herbicide to get down into the plant. So what I'm saying is now you've basically extended your rain fast time. Instead of, oh, it's going to dry out of that plant in 30 minutes like it might if, let's say, you were spraying at 11 o'clock in the morning, now it might take 6 hours or 10 hours before that herbicide fully gets down into that plant. So just make sure that you are paying attention to when's the rain coming and how much dew is there going to be tonight.
And ideally you would have perfect weather when you're out trying to control our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed later in the show.